for a government for that. Floyd, I mean, we've got an international baccalaureate for posh kids in posh schools. What about poor kids in those schools?
Again, I would always argue the baccalaureate would be one of my favourite options for a curriculum. Anyway.
Well, I love the middle years with the project-based work and the discovery stuff.
But what I'd come back to, I actually work in education around the world, and I would come back to these life skills. What do you actually require on your journey through life? And I can honestly say to you, it has not changed in any environment I've ever been in. I think knowledge is about wisdom, common sense and judgment, so knowledge is important. And although you do have to have some cultural adaptations to the way information is presented, as I said, when it comes to what people require, one, to grow as an individual so that your life is fulfilled for you as a person, the fact that you've got to communicate and connect with different people, which means you have to adapt your communication style to be able to be a negotiator, to be flexible in an approach and understand difference. And then you also need resilience. And then you do need to give something back. I think what those kind of fundamental things could be a global curriculum now, because most people I come across believe that anyway. It's a small minority that don't. And what I'd also say is you can't wait for governments because it's just too slow. You have to turn around and do what Finland's doing, going, I'm not waiting for anybody. I will change it myself. And this is where I would say we have a real impact with student voice. And I am blown away. I do leadership training with some of the top businesses in the world, top sports teams. I still am astounded about the innate intelligence of children. And they can have a massive impact. And I think those should become the activists to change things for the better going forward. I would never wait for any government, otherwise we'll be doing the same discussion in the next 30, 40 years. It has to start from the bottom.
Finlay, you've talked to some politicians and people in power. What do you think they could have learned from talking to students?
Well, that's quite difficult actually, because as we've been talking about here, the reason that it would take 30 or 40 years to really leave it to a government is because the politicians say they're going to do something, but then they don't do it. So, to answer... Wait, what was the question again? Sorry.
Well, I mean, you've answered it, really. I mean, they're slow.
They are ridiculously slow. And some politicians say, to do with climate change or the climate crisis, they say, well, we'll just set net zero for 2050, which is them kicking the can down the road to when they don't have to deal with the problem.
Yeah, well, you've done a good job in waking them up for that, not just you, but a number of you. I think the Friday thing's been really, really colossal. But the media hasn't been very strong in all that. I mean, do you feel you're represented? I mean, people have seen what you've done. Do you feel you're represented on television, in the newspapers? Do you get fair coverage?
I don't feel like we, as the climate strike movement, as the marine environment, are represented at all. This is a children's media conference. Has anyone here seen a children's TV programme which has mentioned the plastic pollution or climate change, unlike Newsround or FYI? There's so little anything.
My daughter runs a beach school with little under 5-year-olds, and they're down on the beach with digital microscope, looking at the sand and seeing those little red and blue specks in the sand that's already there, But the local media aren't very interested in all that.
It doesn't help though that we're in Scotland, because even though I've been striking the longest, I've probably had the least publicity, because I'm all the way out there. In London, there's loads of BBC centres and everything.
If you're Sweden, you'd be getting a good old coverage.
Exactly, but because there's so many TV centres in London, it's very easy for them to report it. But people in London aren't just going to wander up to Scotland, are they?
Well,
we've had it once.
Nothing like a good Cayley, but I know what you mean. So look, you three, I mean, you know what's happened with all this over the history of children's media. Time and time again, children have got hold of the channel. They've got hold of, 100 million people watching unwrapping videos on YouTube is significant compared to the Morecambe and Wise show or other huge events. I don't know how many people were watching the girls playing football the other night, me amongst them, but it pales into insignificance between people watching 7-year-olds unwrapping presents, So, but what happens? Do you think there's a moment of patience that they're like, we're done, we've had enough? Do you think children will actually take control of their own learning? Why wouldn't they? They've got all the tools. they've got all the channels. Why wouldn't they do that? Floyd?
No, I don't see why they wouldn't. I think, again, if you have the appropriate media that captures a child, that can give them all the information, and you get great instruction, I think that's powerful. I still believe that coming together as a cohort is beneficial, because that kind of interaction you don't get away with, the ability to connect with people, to learn together. But I do think a proportion of that can be done on their own as well. And I think with the right media facility, and I've been looking at a number of different adaptations and listening to the team today, they gave me some great ideas about how you can put things across in different ways. So I think that will play a major part going forward. But I still think the coming together of people to mix, to communicate, to learn together is a powerful mix, and I would not want to lose that. I think.
No, mutuality is a nice thing, but you don't necessarily need hour by hour geographical proximity for that. I mean, Helen, your stuff's fab. I remember when we set up Teachers TV. You remember the Teachers TV channel? I was on the board. We weren't allowed to say, but I can tell you now, breaching the Official Secrets Act still, we had over 250,000 children watching Teachers TV. They were watching programmes about how to teach. They'd go into school and say to their teacher, "Hey mate, have you seen this thing on teaching maths less boringly? Would you watch it, please?" I mean, why wouldn't kids just go with your stuff on their own and get on with it?
I've got a perfect example of how that just happened recently, actually. We were working with UK RAS, and we ran a robotics competition for schools. And we designed an app, and you use AR, and you basically design your robot. You have a series of challenges on Mars that you have to complete. There's 4 different challenges to enter for the competition. My husband happens to be a design technology teacher, and so I said, "Oh, there's this brilliant competition. Why don't you get to it?" "I haven't got time." So like next week, it really is that. It really is easy. Just go and do it. It's like, "I haven't got time doing the green car project. I've got this after school and doing this." I said, "I haven't got time." And I was sometimes like, "Look, you don't have to do anything. The kids will know how to do this." And it's like, you just need to sign them up, give them a login, send them home for homework. Within 2 days, 4 of them entered the competition. He still hasn't even looked at the app. So it's, I've taught children in the past where I was kind of like, if I lock that child in a cupboard for a week with a book, he's going to learn it anyway. It's, I'm not going to take credit for what he's learned. This child is just a sponge. And you have children like that everywhere, and you give them the right access, absolutely everywhere in the world. Yeah. You give them the right access to the right tools, and they just soak it all in. So one thing we're trying to do with our technology, with the apps that we're developing, with the AR stuff, is just excite children, and it's what we call accidental learning. It's like they're having fun, but it's all useful information going in.
Knowledge by osmosis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Andrew, we're sort of thinking maybe, a future world of learning. You were talking earlier about co-construction, really, but we're into learner-led, aren't we? I think at this point, and it's a 4K video capture device, 60 frames per second, for goodness sake, and when I've got 3 cameras on the back, I'll have AR as well. Why would they wait? Why would they wait? I think we're not seeing a learner-led world as one that looks like Lord of the Flies. It's more like Harry Potter, as a bunch of kids together against the world, or maybe the Goonies. Where does discovery go in a learner-led world?
Well, I mean, we focus on 3 key things: content, and getting that in the hands of teachers, but crucially students, and then professional development, so that the teachers understand how to use that content in the modern world, but also then community, and connecting teachers to their best resource, which is each other, and having that conversation going on so they understand what's happening in all those diverse classrooms. But I think it is that it's getting it in the hands of the students. I think one of my favourite simple little anecdotes was going into a school in the UK to lead some professional development on coding for our coding resource, and the teacher excitedly showing me the lesson plan file for the Year 2 class, which was actually owned by a Year 5 student, because he was the person teaching the Year 2 students, because the doddery old teachers that we were couldn't cope with the content, so the 10-year-old boy was going down and teaching the coding curriculum to the 6-year-olds. And that sense that you've got that knowledge and expertise in the room, why not use it? Why not pass that down? You don't have to be the sage on the stage.
And of course, every if I go into every church, every orchestra, every family, every sports club, every anything, I've got young children chasing after the role model of older children, the older children thinking, blimey, I better get my facts straight here because this little one's a bit sharp, and the little one wanting to be like the older kid, except when we get into education where we've stratified. I get really depressed when I see children's media products saying, for this age range, as though that had any bearing. It's also, one thing you could do, I think, would be tear up any reference to age in any of your stuff. That would be doing you guys a favour, that's for sure. Well, let's go on a little bit. Let's just push that boat out a little bit further then. So, where's the engine for change coming from in all this? We've heard a hunger to be part of the debate, and you've seen pretty clear evidence that he ain't no fool, and we've all got little anecdotes about, well, that was working, but on the other hand, if we wound back to, John Barker's education media conferences in Edinburgh in the 70s, we've been saying much of the same sort of thing. So where does the engine come from for all this? Is it going to be this industry? Is it going to be these students armed with tools? Is it going to be innovative new companies that just pop up in the way that Airbnb or whatever popped up? Where's change going to come from for all of you? Helen first.
I think it's coming from all directions, and I think the voice is getting louder at the moment because you have the children leading the movement, you have interested groups who are all, like I was in London a few weeks ago, a session led by the Curiosity Box, trying to work out from all areas of society how we get children absolutely curious and intrigued with science across everything in and out of the classroom. There was a physically active learning conference in Leeds where there's a lot of academics trying to get behind it, but Public Health England on, we don't want children sat behind a desk and that equals learning. It needs to be out of the classroom, it needs to be in the hall, it needs to be wherever, learning needs to happen actively, get children moving because it gets you, there's evidence and research that shows that it gets your brain moving, everything is much better. You've got all the climate change things, more things are coming into the curriculum that have that global awareness and the citizenship aspect. And I think it's all
so many directions.
Yeah, I think it's all coming together that it will all end up being linked.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. Andrew, what do you reckon?
I suppose the key word for me is listening. Because all of those stakeholders you've mentioned there, and probably many others, are all actually involved in how change works, but it's actually listening to the voices of Finlay and his contemporaries and his peers, and actually hearing the voice of students in education, but also hearing the voices of the teachers, of the families, of the communities, of the global experts in various different fields. And I think it very, very much fits in with the things that Finlay's saying there about developing those skills around resilience, that we have to be open-minded enough to accept the voices of others in order to create.
Yeah, this is beyond co-construction. Yeah. This is about listening.
Absolutely.
Above all else. And as twice we've heard the F word, family, mentioned, and hugely important. I remember very early days of computing, I did a booklet for the BBC called Help Your Child with Computers at Home, and we did a few programmes about it, and parents were key, and they sold out, but the booklet was reprinted so often. They just stopped printing it, and it was bankrupting the corporation, I think, But the voice of parents in all this, Finlay, your parent, was that your dad with you earlier?
Yes.
He must be scared and patient and excited all at once. What's he done to help with all this?
Well, he studied ecology, which sort of helped everything. And he also works by the sea, so that helps as well. And I guess because he studied ecology, he sort of just brought that up on me and my sister when we were growing up. That in order to protect something, you need to protect something else at the same time.
But I guess if he'd have been a poet, you'd have been heading for the same set of concerns from a different direction. Enormously important. And he moved you to the seaside, did he? Was that how you got to be in the seaside?
Well, he's works for Marine Scotland. He's the fishery officer. He used to work in the Kinver, and then he got a job in Ullapool, so we moved there to make things easier.
And he's not going to move to the seaside now, so you're there for good, Parents and discovery. What do you do to get parents on board? And you do tons with teachers. Well, and I would say grandparents. I live with my two granddaughters, so I'd say, a big thing for grandparents.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking from my professional development angle, we actually run professional development sessions for parents. So that we actually get in there and work with schools and families and create activities that they can recreate at home, particularly around kind of STEM activities. But we also run, one of the things that we do media-wise is summer adventures. So providing online tools and resources for families to learn at home and collaborate around using media and around using kind of hands-on practical problem solving, real life activities that they can do in their own home with a few household bits and pieces. Dare I say it, back to my childhood sort of Blue Peter days kind of stuff. But that real, but being coached how to actually draw the best out of the children. Because I remember talking to a family in a parent session we were doing in Q8 one time, and the parent was a very senior government official by chance, and he didn't spend a lot of time with his kids. And I said, the thing that you should be asking yourself every day is not what am I going to tell my child today or teach them, is what questions am I going to ask them so that they are doing that learning. And that's the way that we kind of approach those sessions with parents, and the resources we provide for parents is how do you create questions and problems and ideas that the students, your kids, can get engaged with, and how do you help them to solve the problems rather than the kind of classic old don't worry, I'll do your homework for you business, is how do you solve that problem?
No, but I do feel that our understanding of learning is moving so fast that we've left a lot of parents behind. I mean, a simple thing with 900 million children a year do exams and high stakes tests, and we've never said once to parents, this would be a good breakfast. If you had a big test tomorrow, your SAT's a big day coming up, your hire's just around the corner, what would you have for your breakfast to get your brain buzzing?
Something.
Something.
Probably,
Something's a good answer.
Probably a fruit salad.
Oh, that's interesting. But you see, it's interesting that nobody said. And there's actually a bit of olive oil and avocado, some spinach, some turmeric would be good in there. I mean, we absolutely know. There's a programme, by the way, if anybody wants to make it, about what's good for your brain before an exam. But of course, where you've been, some lively old places in your job before, there's only parents, aren't there?
I believe in capturing parents right from the start, and I think that's about getting them to be engaged, and again in that those life skills for themselves in exactly the same way for the children. So when I run projects, I do exactly that. I've got parents and kids together doing psychometric work, looking at personality types, looking at influence and skills, how to negotiate. So I think you've got to involve parents because they're such a key part in a child's life. But the other thing is that transition for me as well. It's not just when they're at school or they're in an educational environment, which is a safe environment for the most part. It's when they leave that environment where you can have real transformational effect, is when you've given them enough tools and skill sets that they understand that they can take into business, because that's where the problem comes. It's not when they're at school, in some respects for me, it's when they leave a safe environment. What we have to do from an educational perspective, I believe, is then, again, capture those individuals so we don't lose them, and they then lose hope because they're not surrounded by people that want to mentor them and care for them. I think is really, really important. And I've just come back, in fact, in Afghanistan, I've been working with a group that have just formed a boarding school for girls, and some of these girls have had to go through some of the most toughest territories you can imagine to get to the school, and had they been caught on that